What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we are covering Young Justice in DC Rebirth. And to be honest, Young Justice is... well, I mean, really, it was kind of after my time. You know, I pretty much stopped watching comic book-based cartoon shows once X-Men the Animated Series and Batman the Animated Series went off the air. I do remember watching Justice League. No, I didn't really watch Justice League Unlimited, but I watched Justice League. I watched Superman the Animated Series, neither of which was as good as Batman the Animated Series, and neither of those, like none of those were as good as X-Men the Animated Series. Sorry, Batman fans, it was a great show, but X-Men the Animated Series was better. I'm curious, which one do you guys think was better? X-Men the Animated Series or Batman the Animated Series? Because I'm gonna go with X-Men. But nonetheless, I do know there is a huge following for Young Justice. A lot of you guys lived on this show. Like, a lot of you guys read the comics, you guys love the show, the whole 9 yards, and it's cool to see. You know, it's cool to see that it's that big of a thing. But what this does is really kind of bring together the Young Justice team, but a little bit different from what we're used to. So, for those of you guys who are familiar with this concept, bear with me while I run over this for those who aren't. Young Justice was really an answer to, like, what would happen if DC created, like, a new version of Teen Titans, right? Because, like, the Teen Titans as we knew them, by the time Young Justice popped up, the Teen Titans had stopped being the Teen Titans. They had aged up and they were just simply called the Titans. And so rather than creating a new Teen Titans team right off the bat, DC launched Young Justice, and they used Superboy Connor Kent, they used Impulse Bart Allen, and they used Robin Tim Drake. And it was hugely popular. It was really big. Now, because of the fact that it was Young Justice, it was the Young Justice League team, DC in turn used that to kind of like platform into something bigger by basically taking like all the teenage superheroes that existed in or not really all of them, but like a huge portion of the teenage superheroes that existed in DC at the time, and like threw them onto Young Justice. And so because of that, it was basically two Teen Titans for like a new generation of people. And again, it was very popular. Now, really for a lot of fans, they kind of found common ground in like the teenage nature of the titles of both Teen Titans and Young Justice, and the sense that they dealt with teenage issues, they dealt with like young love and different things like that, struggles and so on and so forth. There is kind of a debate among the community in terms of which one was more teen-like in terms of like dealing with teenage issues, which one was basically better, Teen Titans or Young Justice. And you'll find that crowd kind of bickering amongst each other. They'll actually argue pretty intensely. I think they take it a little more seriously than it should, but nonetheless, you know, it's kind of cool to see these things kind of go back and forth. But this is being written by Brian Michael Bendis. And for those of you guys who are not familiar with Bendis, he's literally second to none when it comes to writing young people. No one's as good as he is. He's just got a natural penchant for doing it. And so when he's writing Young Justice, it is exciting. And so what this does is it initially picks up with Jenny Hex. Now, from my investigations of poking around, she's new here, she's created here, and we'll actually find another character created by Bendis, at least I'm pretty sure, in order to kind of flesh out the roster. But again, right off the bat, the introduction of like the great-great-granddaughter of Jonah Hex, it was not an original founding member of Young Justice. And this is smart, because what it is this Bendis basically saying, hey guys, here's Young Justice coming back, but we're not retreading water. We're not doing the same thing that you've seen before. And the reason for this is because in reality, while Young Justice, as it's being written now in Rebirth, is done for the purpose of like reaching out to the comic book crowd and saying, hey, look, like here's like a new young superhero team. The reality of this is that it's designed to tap into the existing crowd of Young Justice readers, because you guys will be the first ones to run to the comic book store and buy it. And so with that being the case, like it has to be done in such a way to where it gives you a return to familiarity, but it's not a carbon copy. And so with this kind of going on in the middle of all this, there's this huge invasion from like another dimension. From the 12 kingdoms of Gemworld. Now in reality, like Gemworld is not new, right? Like, this is not Brian Michael Bendis like inventing it out of thin air. This all goes back to 1983, actually an Amethyst self-titled book, The Princess of Gemworld. Now the idea behind this was that it was kind of tapping into like magic and mystery in DC's landscape, but the problem with this was that it only lasted like a very short amount of time. In fact, it only really lasted, I think, until 1990. But between the time that it was canceled and the time that it showed back up again, Amethyst and Gemworld appeared like a handful of times over 18 years, and then finally came back in 2005 with Infinite Crisis. But it wasn't really until New 52 that Amethyst and so on really kind of got like a reboot alongside everybody else, kind of a reworking of the story. The problem is that it lasted 18 issues in the Sorcery of Swords miniseries, and then DC canceled it because it was just that unpopular. The fact remains that with Gemworld showing up here, again, this is just kind of Brian Michael Bendis tapping into what was already an existing landscape in DC Comics. And so again, Gemworld's had affiliations with like a lot of different teams, with Legion of Superheroes. They've appeared in like the Young Justice titles proper. I mean, they've had a pretty significant involvement, albeit sporadic, throughout DC. But in the middle of this huge invasion, suddenly comes Tim Drake. And it's kind of cool here because the funny funny thing about this is that with Tim Drake showing up, again, this kind of like solidifies the notion of Young Justice, and it's kind of an interesting choice to have Tim Drake show up after Jenny Hex. When you're talking about the relaunch of an existing title, which proved itself to be wildly popular among an existing readership, it's usually the main star of the title before it was relaunched that shows up first. The other part of this is that normally Tim Drake would be operating out of Gotham City, but at the moment, some work that he has going on has brought him to Metropolis, which is where Jenny Hex is and where this whole invasion is going on. But it kind of flashes back to about 4 minutes prior with Connor Kent meeting with Cassie Sandsmark. Now, again, this is kind of interesting because what it does is it throws a little bit of the continuity into play when it comes to like the events of Super Sons. The idea that we saw Cassie Sandsmark, Connor Kent, and Impulse from the future looking back into the past and then trying to stop like that version of Tim Drake from going crazy and so on and so forth. But it is kind of cool to see this unfold because again, Cassie, she really ties into like the New 52, right? Like DC rebooted her back in 2011. Well, really the idea of her being the daughter of Lennox, who was like the half brother, I think, of Wonder Woman, tied her directly to Wonder Woman for the first time that I'm aware of. But she's kind of been free floating and sort of out there in DC, albeit not as active as you would expect. Throwing her into Young Justice, or at the very least featuring her here, really kind of brings her back into the fold. This is how a lot of people know her, or at least how a lot of people want to see her. This is the role that she belongs in. Young Justice is where she needs to stand out. And so in the middle of all this, you have like that huge explosion that goes on. And so Tim Drake was in Metropolis at the time the invasion started, and that's where he and Cassie Sandsmark come from. And so it's kind of cool to see this unfold because with the three of them, really, I guess the two of them jumping in alongside Jenny Hex, the team is starting to take fold. Now, one thing that I also want you guys to bear in mind here is how these villains are written. For the most part, they're written to be not really silly, but villains that you can't really take seriously. That's the nature of Young Justice at the outset. It's the nature of Bendis writing, and it's the nature of how this team is supposed to function. Young Justice is not supposed to be silly, right? It's not supposed to be nonsensical. It's not a goofy book, but it is designed to kind of focus more on the heroes and less on the villains, kind of keeping things light, kind of keeping things pretty simple, not getting too serious here. Again, fans do want the return to the serious stories of the original Young Justice. They do want to return to the teenage themes, but at the moment, it's really more of a celebration of the team's return as opposed to right off the bat, people are dying or something like that. Like we're not getting that, first case scenario. From here, we pick up in Metropolis and we have Impulse showing up. Now, Bart Allen, as far as I'm aware, we don't know what he's been doing since his return at the end of Flash War. But the fact that he's here and he's facing off against like these various threats who are here alongside like Tim Drake and alongside Cassie Sandsmark and Jenny Hex. This is cool because then suddenly we end up getting Teen Lantern, some new person who's got the power of a Green Lantern who's basically a teenager. It's cool stuff. We get like these cool things sort of coming together, being brought together, and basically like Impulse kind of fulfills the role that we expected him to. That's one of the things to bear in mind, that when it came to Impulse in the original Young Justice stories, he was kind of the standout star for some fans because he was impulsive. He lived up to his namesake, but he was kind of like the comedic kid, the one who was just kind of like, let's just go do things. Like, let's just run in and fight them and let's not plan anything out and let's just see what happens. It was kind of fun. In a lot of the ways, he was the voice of fans who really the stand-in for fans who like wanted to be superheroes. And this is why I say Bendis writes so well, is because, Impulse is just like, it's happening. And they're like, what, an invasion? He's like, no, it's happening. Young Justice is back. And it's really, really cool. It's amazing to see because for so many young, older fans out there who read Young Justice, like it's exactly how they feel. Young Justice is back. Holy cow. Like Young Justice is finally here again. It's a time of celebration. It's a really, really cool moment. And so that's when suddenly in the middle of this whole conflict, they basically all started getting yanked away to these different locations, right? Kind of snapped away to these different either dimensions or locales or so on and so forth. Tim Drake is yanked to Gem World, or at least it seems like he's yanked to Gem World, where he basically meets up with Amethyst. And this is kind of the cool thing because of the fact that she was rebooted in New 52, but because of the fact that she was essentially extremely obscure to like the casual comic book reader, Bendis can kind of just clean slate Amethyst if he wants to and just start over. And no one's really going to complain. There's going to be very few people out there who are going to be like, no, Amethyst needs to be the way she was before. And for those people, I'm sorry to say, but you can be ignored and it'll be okay. Like, because she's not really that relevant. She wasn't really that important. She was kind of there and did some things, whatever, but she wasn't by any means like the biggest person ever. She was part of Young Justice and served alongside Young Justice. But again, like we're talking about the post-New 52 landscape, Bendis can do a lot with her here. And so at the same time, where Impulse was yanked away, the other ones were yanked away. We don't really know where a lot of them went to, but where Impulse was yanked away, he's on this kind of weird, desolate place or what have you, and ends up running into Connor Kent. And so at this point, Connor Kent's back. Superboy is here now. And so it's cool because the team is slowly taking shape. The team is taking form. It's exciting. It's a very exciting issue to have here. And it's a very exciting set of events because Young Justice is essentially returning. And again, it's the first story arc. And so much like traditional Bendis storytelling, this first story arc will see the team fighting together against, the threat of Gem World. It'll end however it does, and then Young Justice will officially be reformed. But let me know what you guys think about the return of Young Justice in DC Comics. Let me know how you guys feel about this. But with that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.